This podcast has been produced on the traditional lands of the Gadigal and Bidjigal peoples. From 2RPH, this is Passing Thoughts. I'm Rob Caldor. In this series, we speak openly and honestly about death, dying, and everything that surrounds those final chapters. Today's episode is the last in Series 1, and it's a particularly special one. Jane Mundy sits down with Anne Marinos. Anne is the wife of legendary entertainer Lex Marinos, who died in 2024. Lex chose to use the recently legislated Voluntary Assisted Dying option and passed away at home, surrounded by the people he loved. Be ready to laugh and to cry. I know I certainly did. Here's Jane Mundy with Anne Marinos.
Lex Marinos was the ultimate all-rounder. Film director, arts administrator, cultural advocate, broadcaster, cricket and soccer lover, and, first of all, actor. Perhaps best remembered for his role in the Logie Award-winning 1980s sitcom Kingswood Country. In a 5-decade career, Lex Marinos was one of the most recognisable and accomplished members of Australia's performing arts scene. Lex Marinos died in Sydney on the 13th of September 2024, aged 75, after a 2-decade battle with cancer. He took advantage of the Voluntary Assisted Dying legislation, which came into effect in New South Wales in May 2022. His family announced on social media that he died peacefully at home at a moment of his choosing, surrounded by family and the sounds of Bob Dylan. There was so much love in the room, the post read. Today I'm with Anne Marinos, Lex's wife, in the Sydney home they shared for more than 40 years. Can we start by taking you back to when you met Lex? It was back in 1977, I believe. How did you meet?
We met during rehearsals of a play. We were both married to other people at the time, and we both had a child each. So it was a fairly difficult time for us. However, it was magnificent, really. I was only 27 and he was 28. We were still young and looking for a future together.
What drew you to him?
Oh, I don't think I want to say. He was wearing tight blue patchwork jeans, playing pool. I was at the right end. I don't really know what drew me to him. He was exotic, I guess. Exotic and intelligent and funny. He made me laugh. All through our 44 years together, he made me laugh. That was very appealing and very attractive. And he was very sexy. He was very sexy. Had the afro hair, at that time.
He was very handsome.
Yeah, very handsome. And had a period of time down at the Melbourne Theatre Company. And he'd done some great work down there. And so I was also quite impressed by his talents and his skills and abilities.
And you were an actor as well, right?
Yeah. I graduated from NIDA in 1970. Yeah, so I'd been in theatre for a while. And mainly musical theatre.
So his parents were Greek and he lived in Wagga, where his grandparents ran a cafe until he was 13. How did those early years and his Greek heritage shape him?
His Greek heritage was very important to him, but he desperately wanted to be an Aussie. But there was a very strong Greek community in Wagga Wagga at that time, and his grandfather, who ran the coffee shop and the milk bar, was a very respected member of the community. So within that Greek community, he found comfort and community, I guess. School life was not fabulous because he was the only dark, brooding, swarthy-skinned boy. One of the things that he always said was that he discovered how to make people laugh, and that was a way of escaping the discrimination, the isolation that he felt. He spent a lot of time on his own in his bedroom listening to the radio, listening to the cricket. Didn't have television in those days, but listening to the football, pretending he was a radio announcer. Yeah. I think that's how it shaped his identity, really, because he's on his own, and he loved radio, he loved sport. He loved the fact that he was always able to see his mother encouraged him to go to the movies down in Wagga Wagga, and also there was touring theatre groups and plays and cabaret artists, and he realised, he always said, he realised that if you wanted to meet women, you become an actor.
Lex was first diagnosed with leukaemia in the early 2000s, right?
That's right, yeah.
But he seemed to make a full recovery at that time.
He did. It was a very slow-growing leukemia, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, and he had only one treatment, really, on immunotherapy, and recovered wonderfully well from that, and then had another 20 years, I guess.
Yeah, so the cancer came back in 2023?
Yes, yeah. The CLL had actually come back before that. The leukemia gone through his system again. The lymph glands were swelling. He was having problems with his breathing, with his glands. We went to Dr. Moran, who was his haematologist, and he said, yes, you need to have some more treatment. Let's do that and everything will be fine. And he did have that treatment. That was in sort of November of 2023, and he had that treatment in 24, at the beginning of 24, February, I think. But he had an adverse reaction to that immuno, it was rituximab, and so that treatment had to be put on hold. And then he just was not feeling well. We went to Scotland that year, early in the year, and he just was not feeling well. He's just having problems with his sinuses and his ears, and he also had an operation. There were lots of little bits and pieces. He had a couple of vertebrae, C6 and C7, that he had to have an operation on that because it was making his arm numb. Just everything started to go wrong. Everything started to just sort of fall away from him, and so we then found out, from an X-ray that he'd had, that there was signs of something was there. There was something. They didn't diagnose cancer immediately. They thought it might be just the lymph nodes that were multiplying in his lungs, and that was giving him problem breathing and just lack of energy. So it wasn't until June or July, that he was actually diagnosed with the cancer. And what had happened was that the lymph nodes were disguising the cancer. And it started out as just a small tumour up on the left-hand side of his lung. So there had been debate around that time, knowing that it was diagnosed. It's pretty barefaced, and it was a very traumatic announcement. But anyway, they then decided that they were going to either look at the lymph glands, do the CLL treatment, or the cancer treatment. But they decided to go ahead with the cancer treatment, and so that's what happened. They went ahead with the immuno and the chemo.
And Lex had been a long-term advocate of voluntary assisted dying, hadn't he? He'd long held the idea that it was a good thing.
Yeah.
Why was he so passionate about it?
He just was a principled man, and he just believed that everybody should have the right to choose when they die, and that, particularly if you're suffering at end of life, that we should be able to choose that moment. And it was, part of a just and caring society, that we should be able to choose as our animals. We choose for them, and you watch them go to sleep, and it's just beautiful. Why shouldn't it be the same for all of us? And he did not want to suffer. He's also a bit of a coward, really. And he was always saying, if I'm suffering, I want you to put a pillow over my head. And he was serious. But he wouldn't give me that responsibility, of course. But, it was part of his ethic, part of his politic, advocating for euthanasia.
So I think it was when you had a meeting with the oncologist where he raised it as what he wanted to do for himself.
He did, yeah. Yeah, he did.
How did you feel when he said that?
Oh, I'd heard him say it before when we talked about it previously. He said, I want VAD. And so during the treatment, he'd said to the oncologist, if I don't survive this, if I'm suffering, then I would like to access VAD, and the doctor had said, we'll talk about that later. Because I think they all thought that he might survive this, the treatment. They were very positive that he could get better.
So at that meeting, he'd got to a point where it was becoming intolerable. the cancer and the pain, I suppose.
Yeah, with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, yeah. And he'd been in and out of hospital having tests to, his lungs were filling up with fluid. He'd had his lungs drained about 2 or 3 times. Come home, it just wouldn't get any better. And there were so many doctor's appointments that it was becoming intolerable. And the pain, he wasn't in a great deal of pain, but just discomfort and feeling tired, no energy. Yeah. And the oncologist immediately said, yes, we'll look into that.
And I imagine for such an energetic man who'd been full and rich life, that sense of no energy, struggling to just get yourself around would be very hard to cope with.
Devastating
Yeah.
for him, yeah. I mean, you say no energy. My son runs 3 gyms, one in Neutral Bay, and Lex and I go to the gym. We were going to the gym, and it's the fittest he's ever been, really, prior to the CLL returning. Once when we were at the Royal North Shore Hospital and he was having an infusion, he said, I'm going to make this, I'm going to do this. And he got up, stood up, and he started doing squats. He's going, see? Have you got a photo? He's down, he went, and he's got these tubes hanging out of all his body. He said, he was very positive he was going to come through it. Also, after those first sessions, he was feeling good, and they really were quite enthusiastic about the result of those first x-rays that came out after the first lot of chemo and immuno. But no, the CLL took over. That was the problem then. Comorbidities, they call it. It's terrible.
Yeah,
isn't it?
comorbidities.
Yeah.
So knowing that voluntary assisted dying was what he wanted, despite that, were there moments then when you wished he'd changed his mind? Or were you totally comfortable with it?
I was never really... I was not... Oh, God. That's a difficult question. I was never really comfortable with it, but the family was all very much aware that that's what he wanted, and he had the right to choose the way he would die. And we could see he'd lost so much weight, and he was not going to get better. He was not, in the end. His body gave up on him. We didn't want him to die, but his body would, I'm sure he would have died probably 2 or 3 weeks after the VAD, and it would have been horrendous.
Awful. Yeah.
It would have been horrendous.
For everybody.
Yeah. And when we were given that diagnosis, the whole family were in the hospital room.
And were they all on board with that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
It would be tough if they weren't, wouldn't it? If somebody went, I don't think we should do this for Dad.
I think part of the process of VAD is that all the families on board, you don't have one dissenting family member. All those people who are going to be involved in that process had to approve.
Did any of the medical people try to steer you towards palliative care?
No. However, what we knew was that if he changed his mind, that was okay.
Right up until the last moment.
Right until the very last moment. We had the little box sitting in the pantry, and he could have said, I don't want it. I'm feeling fine. But he didn't say that.
Sounds though he was really very clear about what he wanted.
As always. As always, very clear. I mean, he did say I lived a big life, and I lived it as I wanted.
I'm not sure if he was a religious person at all. Was that a factor in his decision?
Spiritual, but not religious. He wasn't brought up in the church. I mean, Greek Orthodox for a while there, but not really. I mean, he was a very compassionate, loving, caring soul, very vulnerable, adored his grandchildren. He was a good man. Not always easy to live with, but he was a good man.
So knowing that he would use voluntary assisted dying, did that change those final weeks for you?
Look, I've got an amazing family. I've got 3 children and a stepson and 7 grandchildren, and life was busy. It was still busy. And the family were here every day in those last 2 weeks. So it was a bit of a roller coaster, really. And Lex would sit out here and probably in that seat, Jane. And he would, we had visitors. We had visitors who came to see him on the day before he died. We had his best mates, Ted and Anne Robinson and Bruce Mars and Liz Alexander, and I think Themosynelli came as well. on the day before he chose to die, and they were here and he was entertaining them. He was lucid, always had a sense of humour, but his body was letting him down. Yeah. And I was busy. You're busy. You've got so many appointments. You've got people. Once you've put that process in train, then people are coming. You know, people from the VAD, from Voluntary Assisted Dying Health Organisation, North Shore. They came and we were well informed. We were given the booklet. We were signing forms. It's an 11-step process, but it only really takes a week. If you really want to have it done fairly quickly, it's only 7 days.
Is that how long it took for you?
That's how long it took, yeah. He was given a 6-month prognosis when we were given the diagnosis, and it was exactly 6 months.
Was it?
Exactly 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't want it to be that. We were planning a trip to Greece.
So keeping busy, because you had to, was that a helpful thing in the sense of dealing with the process?
Oh, and everybody, I mean, I was still going to the gym. I still went to the gym. It's community moves. It's like I had lots of friends, dear friends at the gym who supported me all through that process, and the family, the next door neighbours. Food was being brought, wine was drunk. You know, we had a very, very busy time. He was probably exhausted, but he did a recording because at the same time there was the Wagga Wagga exhibition, The Lex Factor, was opening in December, and he was meant to go to Wagga Wagga to open this exhibition, which was just an amazing exhibition. We went down in December, and we went down for the opening. But he was talking to them as well about what items were going to be on show, the exhibition items, the photos, the clothes, the paintings from the house, the bits and pieces that were who he was, and it was a history of his working life. And so there was all of that. And that was a great distraction for him as well, I think, during that time. And he did a welcome to the Lex Factor video. And so as you walk into the entrance of the Wagga Wagga Museum, there was Lex saying, you know, he's sitting down, he's looking not very well, but there he is welcoming everybody to the museum. And he did it off the top of his head. He didn't have one note.
Sounds like it was very important to him to keep his professionalism to the end.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was on the day before he died. We had a film crew here.
Wow.
That's only because, I mean, the day before he died, he chose to die the next day because the nights were so bad. The nights were not easy.
So he only had a few more days to live, and I think he was in hospital and then wished to come home. Why was it important to him to be at home when he died?
We've lived here for 44 years, and this is his home.
Yeah. You okay?
This is where family is. This is the grandchildren. The grandchildren couldn't go into the hospital. I mean, one of the babies did, but he wanted to see the grandchildren. He wanted them to be there, and he wanted to see everybody and say farewell. Yeah. Sorry.
And then the final hours, and Lex's health really deteriorates. I think it's in the middle of the night, isn't it? And he says, I want to go, and you say, but it's in the middle of the night.
He was awake at 4 a.m. wanting to go to the toilet, and I couldn't lift him up. And he's saying, I want to go now. I said, you can't go now, the family's not here. So he had another dose of morphine, and he slept for another hour, I think, and then he just said, I want to go now. He couldn't breathe. So he had the oxygen mask, and so I rang the family, and they dragged the kids out of bed, and because they live over in Redfern, and they were here within, I don't know, 3/4 of an hour. Children all gathered in the lounge room, and he was in the front room of the house in the bed, and the kids were in the lounge room, and they all came in and said hi. Hi, Papu. Hi, Papu. Hi, Papu. Hi, Danny. How you going? Hi, Xander. Hi, Felix. Hi, Tali. Hi, Poppy. And the rest of the family, we just sat around on the bed. We gathered photos. We put some music on. We put Bob Dylan and Jackson Browne and Emmylou Harris and a big playlist that we'd already worked on, and candles. Kids came in and out. We made a decision for the taking of the medication to be at 8 o'clock, and so this was about, 6:30 or something. So we made a cup of tea and we all gathered around, and he said he wanted to speak to each and every one of us, and so each of us had a moment. We were just chatting, singing, laughing, having a bit of a joke. At one stage he said, Talia, my gymnastics girl, come and do a handstand. And so she did. She did a handstand in the bedroom.
He was able to get joy right up until the last moment, wasn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. And his voice was very weak, really. He didn't have that strength of voice. And Xander, who's 5-year-old, they were all watching television. He came in and we'd said, Xander, come and say goodbye to Papu. And he raced in, opened the door, put his head round the door and said, bye, Papu. And he went back to the lounge room. Isn't it quite enlightening, isn't it, as to how they respond to these things? They knew he wasn't well, but they didn't realise they were never going to see him again.
Yes.
But yeah, it was lovely. He spoke to his stepdaughter in Canberra, great words of strength and love, and each of us leant down, and he had something to say, something very wise to each and every one of us.
And Anne, how are you feeling at this moment, knowing what you were going to have to do, your role in this? How was that for you?
It was like a dreamlike state, really. We knew it had to be done. We knew that that's what he wanted, and he was the one who was advocating for this. This was on his agenda. As my daughter said, he was leading and directing us for the whole time, really. I had a bit of a chat to him towards the end, and he said, he's the love of my life. And I said, darling, this wasn't in our plans, was it? And he said, you should have read the fine print. And then it was time to, I think I was the last one he spoke to. And then it was time to go and get the medication, unlock the little box, get the vials out, mix the water. We'd had a rehearsal with the VAD team. Can I just say how wonderful they were? Mm. They were just amazing. They just wrapped you in a warm, woolly blanket. And if you needed them at any time, they would have been here. If he'd decided not to do it, or if I was having difficulty with the administration, then they would have been here in a flash. They were just a lovely, lovely group of people, and very skilled at what they do. And
so you didn't need to worry about whether you were going to do it right and whether it was going to...
No, I'd had a rehearsal. No, we'd mixed it out here. He had to know that if he drank this medication, then he would die.
And he has to say that, doesn't he?
He had to say that. Yeah. You have to say that. Yeah.
I can't imagine what that moment must have been like for you.
Oh, it was overwhelming, totally overwhelming. However, I had a job to do, and I was, at that moment, I was strong and I was purposeful and I was doing it for him, and that's what he wanted. Yeah. But he also had to be able to manually drink the liquid himself, and he didn't hesitate. That's terrible, isn't it? He didn't hesitate. He just drank the liquid, and he was there. He closed his eyes immediately, and we're all going, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, Papu, I love you, Dad, I love you, darling. And he put up his thumb and he went, I got that, with his eyes closed, got that. And then he left us.
And what an amazing, how can you put yourself into that position, really, but to go out knowing that you're surrounded by that love.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Amazing.
It is absolutely amazing for him. And that's what he wanted. He wanted to be surrounded by the people that he loved most in the world. And he felt so privileged. He really felt privileged to be able to have access to the VAD because it had only been approved in November 23, I think. And this was, this was September 24. So he felt very privileged. He felt privileged to have had such a wonderful life. He would always say, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to have had such a wonderful life, to have such a wonderful family. And was always thanking us. He was very concerned about leaving me, very concerned about how I would manage without him. He spoke to my daughter about that quite a lot, and how are we going to tell your mum? How are we going to tell your mum that I've got this stage 4 cancer and I'm not going to be with her anymore?
Yeah.
So he felt very privileged to have had the life he'd had. Yeah.
And for you, since he's been gone, how has the fact that he died using voluntary assisted dying impacted this next period for you and your grief, I suppose? Has it been easier or more difficult knowing that he left this world in the way he wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think what would have happened if he didn't, but I know we did the right thing because he didn't want another two or 3 weeks of the awful period that we just had. He didn't want that. And as I said before, he was not going to get any better, and we knew that was the case. So we made the right decision, and I say we because all my family were on board with him. I mean, I say I didn't want him to die. Of course I don't want him to die. I want him to be here now with me. I wanted him to come to Greece. But that was his choice. It was his choice, and it was the right choice. It was the right choice, and wasn't he so lucky to be able to have access to that?
A heartfelt thank you to Anne Marinos for sharing her story. She welcomed us into her warm, love-filled home, and her honesty and generosity of spirit were deeply appreciated. And thank you to Jane Mundy for approaching this deeply personal conversation with such care and sensitivity. Before we go, being that this is the final episode of Series 1, I thought I'd touch base with our 3 contributors to see how making Passing Thoughts has affected them. Making a podcast about death and dying can be challenging, and I know that it has affected me, but in a positive way. This is Barbara Sullivan's take.
I've had conversations for the podcast with some very compassionate but practical people, and my main takeaway is the importance of dignity in death. And these are busy people with many commitments who simply make time for calm interactions with those who are dying. Part of this is actively listening, enabling the difficult conversations, discussing their last wishes, making people feel valued to the end.
And Connie Mason.
Since I've been working on this podcast, I've learnt a lot about death and also what I can do to manage my end of life. What has been particularly interesting for me is the more I learn about death, the more I'm able to accept it as a perfectly normal and natural event in my life.
And this is Jane Mundy's take.
I've had the privilege of speaking with people who have experienced the many phases of death and dying. I've spoken with people who have sat with loved ones at the end of their lives and with those who have supported them in various ways. And what I've learned is that the topic of death and dying need not be taboo. It can be as natural as talking about the birth of a baby, simply the final chapter in the whole spectrum of life.
It's been an honour to share the mic with these amazing women. The good news is that we are already in production of Series 2. If you think friends and family would benefit from listening to Passing Thoughts, let them know. We're on all the major podcasting platforms, and if you get a chance, please rate and review us. Passing Thoughts is made with the generous support of the Wicking Trust and the team from 2RPH. A special thanks to Marty, Veronica and station manager Barry. If you have feedback, topic suggestions, email us at passingthoughts@2rph.com.au. www.rph.org.au.
This is a Radio 2 RPH production.